After years of being mistreated, my parents suddenly started acting like we'd always been some perfect, loving family. I'd been collecting proof of their lies for a long time, and when the time was right, I picked a quiet, almost invisible kind of revenge. They never saw it coming. Growing up, it was always obvious that if my dad so much as tried to compliment or support me, my mom would blow up. I still remember being 10, sitting at the dinner table, when she screamed at me for eating too much. I was fighting back tears and glanced at my dad, silently begging him to speak up. He managed to start, "Honey, don't you think?" But she cut him off and stormed away before he could even finish the sentence. That moment marked the last time he ever really tried to defend me. When I was 11, I came inside with dirt on my shoes. My mom looked ready to explode, but my dad jumped in first and barked, "You're almost a teenager. How are you still acting like a useless little idiot?" I stared down at the floor, pressing my tongue to the roof of my mouth, trying not to cry. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her beaming. She hugged him and quietly told him, "Good job," like he'd done something noble. That's when it really hit me. This whole family revolved around my mom, and I was just background noise. As I got older, her yelling turned physical, and my hatred for both of them only grew. Anytime my dad slipped up, whether he forgot the dishes or didn't immediately look away from a woman who passed by, he'd somehow make it up to her by punishing me. That meant wrecking my bedroom and then making me clean it, or dragging me out of bed at 5 a.m. on a Sunday to scrub the entire house. It always gave him a little breathing room, but it was never enough for her. Eventually, he started to notice. One evening, I was using her phone to help with my math homework when a text popped up from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "You looked so good last night." My curiosity took over, and I scrolled through the entire conversation. A strange kind of excitement rushed through me. I thought, maybe if I show this to Dad, he'll finally see her for who she is and start siding with me again. But just as I let myself hope, it all collapsed. The second I showed him the messages, he slapped me hard across the face. "How dare you go through your mother's phone?" he snapped. But I was so used to this kind of reaction that I didn't even flinch. I just went back to my homework. Still, something shifted after that. He started looking me in the eye again. He stayed quieter when arguments broke out. The beatings weren't as bad. Not long after, I left for college and cut all contact with my mom. As for my dad, we kept it limited to a once-a-year text on my birthday and Christmas. That was it. I was completely done with them, especially after meeting friends whose parents practically competed over who loved them more. 3 years passed. I was 22 when my dad invited me over for Thanksgiving. By then, I had my degree in engineering, landed an entry-level job, and drove a decent car. I finally felt stable enough to show up. Therapy and real friends had helped me understand something important. My mom's opinion held no value, and if my dad tried anything, I wasn't the same scared kid anymore. When I walked in, I had no idea what to expect, but it definitely wasn't him giving me a hug. The first one since I was a kid. I stayed cautious but hugged him back. Meanwhile, my mom was in the kitchen, cooking like always. There was tension in the air, but for the first time in forever, I felt a flicker of hope. We sat down to eat, and I planned to stay quiet, only speaking if someone spoke to me. Old habits die hard. Then my mom cleared her throat and stared straight at my dad. I realized my elbows were on the table and braced myself, expecting the usual scolding. But he just said, "He's not a kid anymore. We don't need to do all that." My eyes widened. I saw the fury rise in her face. She muttered under her breath, "I knew you never loved me," then went back to eating like nothing happened. Right then, something clicked in his mind. The mood in the room shifted, and she felt it too. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through his photos. There was this sharp edge in his voice as he scrolled through photos, listing out moments. "Remember when I bought you this?" Or planned that night. Before asking her, "What have you ever done for me?" My mom flushed red and went silent. My dad just stared ahead, brows furrowed. Then, almost too calmly, he said, "You only loved me when I heard our son." She looked like she might respond, but he didn't wait. He just walked out. I wasn't about to stay alone with her, so I followed him to his car. "Son, I let you down." "I'm sorry," he said. It was the first time I'd heard those words. I nodded and got in beside him, hugging him briefly. But beneath the surface, something darker churned. His apology mattered, but it couldn't undo everything. The damage was done. We sat in silence, the windows fogging up from the cold air. After a while, I asked, "So what now?" He rubbed his face, looking older than I remembered. "I don't know," he said. I didn't either. I wanted to unload everything, to tell him every way he failed me, but I felt too drained. "I should probably head out," I said, reaching for the door. He caught my arm, not harshly but gently. "Can we get a coffee or something? I think we need to talk." I hesitated. A 5-hour drive waited, and I wasn't sure I even wanted to hear what he had to say. But curiosity won out. "All right, one coffee." We drove separately to Joe's place, the only open spot on Thanksgiving night. It was mostly empty, just a few tired truckers and folks who looked like they'd also escaped family drama. We slid into a booth, and a waitress came by for our order. Once the coffee came, I looked at him. "You said you wanted to talk?" He stared into his mug for a long time, then said, "I've been seeing a therapist." I blinked. My dad. The guy who thought therapy was for weak people? "Since when?" I asked. "About 5 months. After your mom's incident." "What incident?" I asked. He looked surprised. "You didn't hear? I figured that's why you came for Thanksgiving." I shook my head. In June, she had a breakdown. Got fired for yelling at her boss, then crashed into a store display. No one got hurt, but the court ordered therapy. The thought of my mom in therapy was wild. She always acted like she was perfect and everyone else was the problem. "So you started therapy because of her?" I asked. "Sort of. The court suggested couples therapy. I went to support her, but the therapist encouraged me to try solo sessions." He took a sip of coffee. That's when it hit me, how broken everything was, including me. I stayed quiet. What was I supposed to say? "Congrats on realizing you were abusive?" "I know I can't undo the past," he continued. "But I see it now, what we did to you. What I did. And I'm sorry." I gave a small nod, not trusting my voice. For years I'd imagined this moment, him admitting the truth. But instead of feeling relief, all I felt was numb. Eventually, I asked what had been weighing on me. "What about Mom? Has therapy helped her at all?" My dad's expression darkened. "She quit after the court-ordered sessions. Said it was all nonsense, claimed the therapist was biased." I wasn't shocked, just curious. "Then why'd she even invite me to Thanksgiving?" He let out a dry laugh. "I thought she was getting better." Clearly, I was wrong. Thinking back to her outburst at dinner, I nodded. "Yeah, very wrong." The silence settled again until he suddenly said, "I'm leaving her." My head snapped up. "What?" He nodded. "I've had an apartment lined up. Was going to wait until after the holidays. But after tonight? Why wait?" I didn't know what to say. They'd been married for 27 years. As toxic as it was, I never imagined them actually splitting. "So now what?" I asked. "I try to start over," he said. "Something real. Something better than what we had." Then he looked me in the eye. "And I'd like to build something real with you too, if you'll let me." I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to give him a chance. But another part, shaped by years of cold shoulders and bruises, was screaming it was too late. "I'll need time," I said. He nodded. "Take all the time you need." We finished our coffees quietly. He paid, even though I half-heartedly offered. Outside, he gave me an awkward pat on the shoulder. "Drive safe." "You too," I said automatically. I watched him drive off, back to that house where Mom was probably fuming in silence. For a second, I felt sorry for him. But it passed quickly. He'd had chances. And he stayed. He helped her hurt me. I drove home, 5 long hours through the dark, thinking. By the time I pulled into my spot, I'd made up my mind. My dad, I'd give him one honest chance to prove he was different. But my mom, she was going to get exactly what she deserved. Over the next few weeks, I got to work. And I mean that literally. I planned everything. I gathered years of evidence. Screenshots of texts, emails, voicemails, videos, proof of everything I'd endured. I hadn't realized I'd kept it all. Maybe part of me always knew this day would come. I created a private Instagram account and began uploading it, labeled, dated. The texts where she called me worthless. A video from when I was 16, her throwing a plate at me because I got a B in chemistry. The voicemail where she slurred that I should never have been born. Then I started reaching out. Teachers who'd ignored the signs. Neighbors who'd heard the yelling. And Aunt Carla, Mom's sister who'd stopped coming around when I was 15. I always wondered why. We met for lunch that November. "I always knew something was wrong," she admitted. "I tried talking to your mom, but she'd shut down. Eventually, she cut me off." "Did you ever think of calling CPS?" I asked. My voice was tight. She looked down. "I should have. I told myself maybe you were just sensitive. I'm so sorry, Thomas. I nodded. I accepted it, not because it fixed anything. It didn't. But she helped. She had stories, childhood memories that aligned with what I knew. And she had numbers, relatives who'd also cut ties with my mom. More puzzle pieces. And I was finally ready to lay them all out. During all this, my dad kept texting me. At first, it was just light stuff, asking how work was going, sending me articles about engineering that he thought I'd like. Then the tone shifted. He started opening up more, telling me about his therapy sessions, owning up to things I'd never imagined he'd even remember. Remember when I threw away your science fair project because you got a better grade than your cousin? One text said. I've been thinking about that a lot. It was cruel, and I'm sorry. I should have protected you from your mom's anger. Instead, I used you to take the heat. You didn't deserve that. Every message hit me like a small jolt. For so long, I'd wondered if I'd imagined it all, if I'd made the abuse seem worse in my head. But here it was. Confirmation. It had been real. As awful as I remembered. Right before Christmas, I agreed to meet up with him again, this time somewhere nicer than Joe's place. He looked better, more grounded somehow. I did it, he said as soon as we sat down. I moved out last weekend. I'm living in the new place now. I raised an eyebrow. How'd Mom take it? He let out a breath. Exactly like you'd expect. Screaming, crying, threats. She dumped my clothes on the front lawn and lit my favorite chair on fire. Jesus, I muttered. Yeah, neighbors called the cops, but by the time they got there, she was calm again. Did the sweet, confused housewife act? He shook his head. I'm filing for divorce after the holidays. I nodded, sipping my water. Did you tell anyone else? Just my brother and my therapist. I'm not ready for the full family freakout. And he hesitated. I haven't told them everything. About how I treated you. Still working up the nerve. I almost said, don't worry, they'll all find out soon enough. But I kept that to myself. He glanced at me. You could come by sometime, if you want. See the new place. It's not much, but it's clean. Quiet. We could watch a game or something. I agreed. Mostly out of curiosity. I wanted to see what kind of life he was really building. Whether it was real, or just another mask. His apartment was exactly what he said it would be. Simple, tidy, bare. A one-bedroom in a quiet part of town, with just enough furniture to make it livable. No decorations. No photos. It looked like a fresh start, like someone trying to rebuild from nothing. We ordered pizza and watched basketball. Made awkward conversation during commercials. It felt strange being alone with him, without my mom's presence looming like a storm cloud. I kept waiting for something to crack, for him to snap and reveal the man I remembered from my childhood. But he didn't. When I was getting ready to leave, he handed me a small wrapped box. Early Christmas present, he said. You don't have to open it right away. I waited until I got to my car. Inside was a framed photo from my college graduation. I hadn't even known he was there. I definitely hadn't invited him. But there I was, in my cap and gown, smiling with my friends. He must have been standing far back, watching. There was a note tucked behind the photo. I missed so many important moments in your life because I was a coward. I'm trying not to be a coward anymore. I sat there staring at that note for a long time before driving home. Part of me wanted to toss it. To reject the gesture, write it off as too little, too late. But another part, the part one barely wanted to acknowledge, felt something shift inside me. Something small. Something soft. That feeling didn't last long. The next day, my phone rang. For the first time in years, it was my mom. I let it go to voicemail. Her message made my blood boil. Thomas, it's your mother. I don't know what lies your father's been feeding you, but he's going through a midlife crisis. He's not thinking straight. I need you to talk some sense into him. Not a word about Thanksgiving. Not one hint of regret for everything she'd done. Just more of the same blame, manipulation, trying to turn me into her pawn again. I added the voicemail to the Instagram archive and kept going with my plan. My private Instagram had become a vault of evidence. Screenshots, messages, testimonies. I had statements from extended family, old teachers, even neighbors. I'd written detailed accounts of the abuse, incident after incident, moment after moment. And I had a list. Everyone who needed to see it. My mom's boss, her church friends, her book club, her siblings, her cousins. People on my dad's side. Neighbors. Anyone who'd ever bought into the perfect mother image she sold so convincingly. When it came to my dad, though, I hesitated. Should I include him in the mass email I was planning to send? He'd hurt me too, but lately, he seemed like he was trying to change. like he actually felt guilty. In the end, I decided to give him a heads up, not because I thought he deserved it, but because I wanted to see how he'd respond. I called him one evening. "Dad, I need to tell you something," I said once he picked up. "What's going on? Are you okay?" His voice sounded genuinely concerned. "I'm fine," I said, "but what I'm about to do is going to affect you, and I thought you should know first." There was a pause. "Okay," he said carefully. "I'm going public with everything. Everything Mom did to me. Everything you both did. I've got evidence. I've got statements. And tomorrow, I'm sending it to everyone, her job, her friends, our whole family." He didn't respond right away. I waited, half expecting him to yell, to guilt-trip me, maybe even threaten me. That was the version of him I knew best. But instead, he said quietly, "I understand. You're not going to try to stop me?" I asked, surprised. "No," he said. "You have every right to tell your story. What we did was wrong. And if this is what helps you heal, then you should do it." I didn't know what to say. I braced for a fight. For manipulation. Not for acceptance. It caught me off guard. He asked gently, "I assume I'll be part of what you're sharing too?" "Yes," I admitted. "I can't tell the truth without including your part in it." "That's fair," he said. Then, after a pause, "I just don't want to lose my job. I'm on my own now. I need to support myself." I considered that. It wasn't an excuse, just a request. And unlike my mom, he'd actually apologized. He'd owned his actions. Shown remorse. "I can leave your employer out of it," I said. "Thank you," he replied. Then quietly added, "For what it's worth. I'm proud of you. For standing up for yourself. Even if it's against us." After we hung up, I sat at my desk, staring at the draft email. It was ready to go, addressed to more than 40 people, with a link to the private Instagram and a short explanation of what they'd find there. My finger hovered over the send button. Was I really going to do this? Was I ready to blow up my mom's entire life? To make her face everything she'd done? She might lose her job. My dad would be publicly confronted with his own history. And me? What would I really gain from it? Justice? That darker voice inside me whispered. Validation. Revenge. But another voice, maybe my therapist's, or maybe just a quieter part of myself, asked something else. Would this actually help me heal? Or would it just keep me stuck in the same cycle of pain? I closed the laptop without sending anything. I wasn't ready yet. The next day, I got a text from my dad. "Whatever you decide, I support you." It wasn't the message that changed everything. It was what it made me realize. I was still living my life around them. Still letting my parents dictate my actions. Even this whole plan, this grand moment of truth and retribution, was all centered on them. I didn't want that anymore. I didn't want to just move away. I wanted to be free. Truly free. Not just physically, but emotionally. I wanted their voices out of my head. Maybe the answer wasn't revenge. Maybe the real power was in letting it go. I deleted the email. And then I made the Instagram account private, visible only to me. I saved everything, the evidence, the testimonials. Not because I wanted to use them as weapons, but to remind myself I wasn't imagining things. That it all really happened. Then I called my therapist and asked for an emergency session. "I think I'm having a breakdown," I told her. Then I paused. Or maybe it's a breakthrough. I don't even know anymore. We ended up talking for an hour. We went over everything. Thanksgiving dinner, my dad's apology, my mom's voicemail, my plan for revenge, and the choice I made to step away from it. "What kind of relationship do you want with your parents moving forward?" she asked. "With my mom." I didn't hesitate. "None. I don't want any relationship with her." She hadn't changed, and deep down, I knew she never would. "And your dad?" That question was harder. "I'm not sure," I admitted. A part of me wanted to give him a chance. He seemed sincerely sorry and was actually putting in work during therapy. But another part of me was still furious. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust him again. "You don't need to figure it all out right now," she reminded me. "Healing isn't a straight line, and forgiveness doesn't have to be all or nothing." She told me I could start with small steps, set clear boundaries, and just see what happens. I nodded, and for the first time in a while, it felt like a weight lifted off me. I didn't need to have everything figured out that day. I could go at my own pace, protect my peace, and figure it out as I went. In the months that followed, I began building a slow, cautious relationship with my dad. We'd get dinner every few weeks, or he'd drop by to catch a game. At first, we kept it surface level, but eventually we started opening up more. His progress in therapy, my career goals, even a few good memories from when I was little. One night, After we'd had a couple beers, he brought up my mom. She's been calling me nonstop, he said. One minute she's threatening me, the next she's begging me to come back. Are you tempted? I asked, trying not to show any reaction. He shook his head without hesitation. Not even a little. I finally feel free. I can breathe again for the first time in decades. He took another sip of his beer. The divorce should be finalized next month. She's fighting it every step of the way, but my lawyer says there's nothing she can do to stop it. That's good, I told him, and I genuinely meant it. Just the idea of them reuniting made me feel sick. There's something else, he said, looking kind of uneasy. She's been asking about you. Wants to know if I've seen you, how you're doing. I instantly felt my body tighten. What did you tell her? Nothing detailed, he said. Just that we talked a few times and you seem to be doing okay. I didn't tell her we've been meeting up regularly. I let out a breath, relieved. The last thing I wanted was for her to show up at my door or my job. She says she wants to see you, he added. Says she misses you. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Yeah, I bet she does. She misses having someone to manipulate and tear down. He didn't argue. I told her I wouldn't push you. That it's entirely your choice if you want contact. I don't, I said, my voice steady. Not now. Maybe not ever. I understand, he replied. And I'll respect that. No passing messages. No playing middleman. Of course, he said. We sat quietly for a bit, the TV murmuring in the background. Then I broke the silence. Can I ask you something? There was something I'd always wanted to ask, but never had the nerve until that moment. Why did you stay with her all those years? I asked. Why did you let her treat me like that? Was it really because you loved her that much? He didn't answer right away, just sat there, staring at his beer bottle, silent for what felt like forever. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with regret. I didn't stay because I loved her, he said. I stayed because I was scared of her. Scared of what might happen if I left. Scared of being alone. Scared of facing the truth that I'd made a massive mistake. He looked up at me, eyes shiny with tears. I used you, he said quietly. You were a shield. As long as she was lashing out at you, she wasn't coming after me. He shook his head. It was cowardly and unforgivable. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me was grateful for the honesty, but another part was freshly furious, because he'd basically admitted he threw me under the bus to protect himself. I know I can't undo what I did, he went on, but I want you to know that I see it now. I see how wrong I was. And I'm doing everything I can to be better, a better man, a better dad, if you'll let me. I gave a small nod. I didn't trust my voice enough to answer. We finished our beers without saying much after that, and he left not long later. I stayed behind, alone in my apartment, just sitting there, processing everything he'd said. The truth was, I wasn't sure if I'd ever be able to fully forgive him. The hurt he'd caused had left deep, lasting marks. But for the first time, I was beginning to believe that he was truly sorry and that he was making real changes. That didn't mean I forgave him, but maybe I was willing to see where things could go from here. When it came to my mom, though, things were clearer. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with her. Even just imagining her voice made my stomach twist with anger and dread. She hadn't shown an ounce of remorse. No self-awareness. No willingness to change. She was still the same manipulative, emotionally abusive person she'd always been. And yet, something inside me had started to shift. Not quite indifference, not yet, but the beginnings of it. I was starting to understand that she didn't have any power over me anymore. Not unless I let her. I didn't need payback. I didn't need to blow up her life or prove anything to anyone. All I needed was to live on my terms, away from her influence. That, I figured, would be the best kind of revenge. Or so I thought. But life likes to throw curveballs when you least expect it. And it came. I was at work, knee-deep in spreadsheets and rushing toward a deadline, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my dad. Your mom's in the hospital. Tried to take her own life last night. She's stable now. I just stared at the screen, frozen. For a long moment, I felt absolutely nothing. Then came a weird mix of emotions, shock, and this strange, low flicker of guilt. Even though I knew, logically, that none of it was on me. I texted him back to ask which hospital, then let my boss know I had a family emergency. The drive there felt like a dream. I hadn't laid eyes on my mom in over a year. I didn't even know why I was going. Curiosity? Some buried sense of duty? Or maybe I just needed to see her with my own eyes and know she was still breathing, even after everything. When I got to the hospital, I found my dad in the waiting room, looking completely worn out. He stood when he saw me, clearly surprised. You came, he said. I shrugged. Yeah, I'm not sure why, but I'm here. He sat back down and started explaining what had happened. After the divorce, my mom started falling apart. She got fired for showing up drunk, lost most of her friends, and one night mixed pills with alcohol, then called 911 on herself. The doctors don't think she really wanted to die, Dad told me. More like a cry for help. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want her dead, but I couldn't summon sympathy either. Can I see her? I asked. She's sedated. Maybe later, he said. Then added, you don't have to stay. I just thought you should know. I'll stay a while, I said, surprising even myself. We ended up in stiff hospital chairs, sipping awful coffee while everything around us felt unreal. Dad looked worn out, like he'd aged overnight. Why are you even here? I asked. You're divorced. He rubbed his face. I don't love her anymore. But we were married 27 years. I can't just feel nothing. Weirdly, I understood. I told myself I didn't care about her, but deep down, there was still some twisted trace of feeling. Not love, just a leftover ache. A few hours later, the doctor told us she was awake and allowed a short visit. You go first, I said. I need a minute. While Dad was with her, I paced the hall, running through every possible version of what I could say. Angry? Cold? Gentle? I had no idea. When he came back, he looked drained. She's asking for you. I stepped into the room and froze. She looked so small. Pale. No makeup, messy hair. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw me. Thomas, she whispered. You came. I stayed near the foot of the bed. Yeah, Dad texted me. I didn't think you would, she said. Not after everything. I didn't reply. I'm sorry, she said. I know I was a terrible mother. That made me pause. I'd never once heard her apologize. Not for anything. Was it real? Or just another performance? The doctors want me to go to therapy, she continued. They say I have issues. No kidding, I thought, but kept it to myself. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know, I realize now I was wrong. About so many things. I nodded slowly, still unsure. We sat in heavy silence for a few minutes. As I turned to leave, she asked, Do you see your dad much? Yeah, sometimes, I said. That's good, she replied. He was always a better parent than I was, even with all his flaws. That surprised me. Was she really acknowledging his faults too? I should go, I said. I hope you feel better. I made it to the door when she called out, Thomas, will you come see me again? When I'm out of here? I turned to look back. She looked sad, maybe even genuine, but I'd seen her play this game before. I don't know, I said honestly. I need time to think about it, I told her. She nodded and stared at her hands. I understand. I left the room in a daze. That wasn't the mom I remembered. She never apologized, never looked fragile or remorseful. It was like seeing a stranger. Dad was in the hallway. How'd it go? Weird. Really weird, I said. She apologized. Said she was a terrible mom. His eyes widened. Well, didn't expect that. We walked out together, and he suggested grabbing food. We ended up at a small diner, eating burgers and talking things through. He said the hospital planned to keep her under observation, then move her to inpatient treatment, depression, alcohol issues, the works. Is she actually going to go? She says she will, he replied. But you know your mom. Hard to trust that. I poked at my fries. Do you think she meant it? The apology. He sighed. Could be. Sometimes a close call shakes people up. Could be the meds. Could be more manipulation. Time will tell. And surprisingly, it did. She followed through with inpatient treatment. Even stayed in therapy afterward. I didn't visit, but Dad kept me updated, checking in, making sure she stayed on track. A few months later, I agreed to meet her. Coffee, public place, 20-minute cap. I texted Dad my location, just in case. She was already there when I arrived. 2 cups on the table. She'd remembered how I like my coffee black, 1 sugar. That tiny detail hit me harder than I expected. Thanks for coming, she said. Sure, I replied, cautious. She looked healthier. Hair done, subtle makeup. No heaviness. No chaos. Just softer. She asked about work. Mentioned Dad told her I had a big project going. We made small talk. It was surreal. No digs, no guilt trips. Just her asking and actually listening. Eventually, I cracked. What's going on, Mom? Why are you like this now? She looked down. Like what? Like you care. Like you're normal. She winced. I deserve that, she said quietly. Then, she took a breath. My therapist diagnosed me with narcissistic personality disorder, some borderline traits, and alcohol use disorder. She let out a dry laugh. Hell of a mix, huh? I didn't laugh. I was still stunned she was even admitting this. She says I've been self-medicating for years, drinking instead of dealing with emotions I never learned how to manage. She met my eyes. That's not an excuse. Just an explanation. Okay, I said, unsure how to respond. I'm on meds now. For depression. For anxiety. And I haven't had a drink in 71 days. There was a hint of pride in her voice. That's good, I said, and I meant it. No matter everything else, sobriety was a real step forward. She kept going. I've been doing a lot of thinking about why I treated you the way I did. My therapist says I was jealous of the attention your dad gave you, that I saw you as competition instead of my own child. She shook her head, like she couldn't believe she'd admitted it out loud. Sounds so stupid when I say it, doesn't it? It did sound ridiculous. But somehow it made a weird kind of sense. It explained why she'd get so furious whenever Dad showed me any kindness. I know I can't undo the damage I caused, she said quietly. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but Thomas, I'm sorry. More than I can say. I just sat there, stunned. This was the apology I'd dreamed about for years, the acknowledgement I'd been desperate for, but now that it was actually happening, I didn't know what to do with it. I don't expect forgiveness, she added when I didn't say anything. I just want you to know I'm trying to change. For myself, but also because I hope maybe someday we can have some kind of relationship. Not like before, something healthier. I nodded slowly. I appreciate you saying all this, but I need some time to process it. Of course, she said quickly. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. We finished our coffees in silence, and I made up an excuse about having to get back to work. As I stood to leave, she reached out like she wanted to hug me, but then stopped herself. Thank you for coming, she said instead. Yeah, I replied. Take care of yourself, Mom. Over the next year, my relationship with both my parents shifted in ways I never expected. Dad and I got closer. We started doing typical father-son stuff, watching games, working on his car, even taking a fishing trip. He wasn't perfect. Sometimes he said or did things that brought back old memories, but he was trying. And when he messed up, he apologized right away and for real. Mom's story was more complicated. I kept my distance at first, only meeting her in public spots for short visits. But as the months passed and she stayed consistent with therapy and sobriety, I slowly let her back into my life. We'd never have the close mother-son bond you see in movies, but we built something at least not harmful. The real test came last Thanksgiving, exactly 1 year after that disastrous dinner that changed everything. Dad suggested we all have dinner together, somewhere neutral. Are you sure that's a good idea? I asked him. Probably not, he admitted. But your mom's been asking. I thought maybe it would be good closure for all of us. I agreed reluctantly. We met at a nice steakhouse downtown. The first few minutes were painfully awkward. We were all overly polite, walking on eggshells. But little by little, the conversation started to flow naturally. Mom asked about my new apartment. Dad talked about a woodworking class he'd signed up for. I shared stories from a recent work trip. No yelling. No tears. No one stormed out. Just dinner. Normal, boring dinner with two people who happened to be my parents. As dessert wrapped up, Mom cleared her throat. I want to thank you both, she said, for giving me another chance. I know I don't deserve it, Mom said quietly. Dad and I exchanged a look. Neither of us was exactly comfortable with moments this emotional. We're all just doing our best, Dad finally said. I nodded. One day at a time, right? It wasn't perfect. We all still had our issues, our triggers, our bad days. Mom would sometimes slip back into old habits when she got stressed, but she caught herself quicker now. Dad still struggled with setting boundaries. And me? I was still untangling years of trauma and therapy. But we were trying. All of us, in our own way, trying to be better than we used to be. Maybe that's all anyone can really do. Driving home that night, I thought about how different everything was from the plans I'd made a year ago. Back then, I was so focused on revenge, making my parents pay for what they did. But in the end, the best revenge wasn't exposing them or humiliating them. It was building a life that wasn't defined by them or their abuse. It was finding my own way to heal. I still had that private Instagram account filled with all the evidence. I kept it, not as a reminder of what I'd been through, but as proof of how far I'd come. From a scared kid who couldn't stand up for himself, to a man who could set boundaries and demand respect. From someone drowning in anger and pain, to someone working towards something like peace. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. My parents didn't suddenly become perfect. Our relationships would always be complicated, always carry the scars of the past. But they were relationships I chose to have now on my terms, with my boundaries clearly set.